Alright, so welcome to our third installment on our little series here on car control. The first one we talked just about acceleration. The second one we talked just about braking. This one we're going to be talking about steering. You know, how the throttle and the brake kind of play in with the steering a little bit, what you're doing with the steering, when and where you're turning. We're not going to get as far as, you know, lines and apexes and racing lines and some of that stuff and turning over bumps and some of the more complex things, big surface changes yet. But really just the fundamentals of controlling a vehicle, whether you're turning around a corner, whether you're turning to avoid an obstacle in the road. Basically, just like anything else, you have to think of your steering as an input that you give the car, and then you need to assess from there whether or not that input kind of caught and did exactly what you wanted it to do. Whenever you're driving around on the street, normal daily driving situations, at reasonable speeds, just being a responsible motorist, when you turn the wheel, the car's going to turn. The more you turn the wheel, the more the car's going to turn. If you turn smoothly, the car turns smoothly. If you turn abruptly, the car turns abruptly. And that's all well and good. And we've got kind of many years of this muscle memory built into ourselves just from doing this day in and day out and day in and day out. And what you're going to find is, as you start driving at higher speeds, or you start driving on more and more slippery roads, when you turn the steering wheel, the car may or may not respond to that. It might not turn at all, it might start skidding, it might start sliding, a lot of different things can happen. The more you start to push the limits as far as speed, especially on loose surfaces and kind of different variables and different road surfaces, you're going to be getting into trouble a little bit if you think that your normal daily driving skill set is really going to apply when you're driving at higher speeds. So the first thing, I know everybody's, I'm sure, very basic stuff, but let's just get it out of the way right here. Good hand position. Most people driving around on the street, you can see them, the one hand on the wheel, or the holding the wheel down here going down the interstate, or whatever it might be. Something you can practice daily driving just in your normal car or anything that you're driving around out there. Just maintain good hand position. Typically in a rally car and a race car, most drivers feel most comfortable with their hands at 9 and 3 because it gives you the ability to turn. You always know where center is, and if you do need more steering than that, we can talk through it. You know, some drivers in some situations are going to be shuffling the steering wheel, and some drivers in some situations, you know, once you get to this point, are going to go ahead and turn hand over hand to accomplish more steering than that. What you want to avoid is the one-hand palming of the wheel. Things can go wrong, or basically anytime you've only got one point of contact with the steering, if you're driving around a corner and there's a bump or a rut or something like that, it's going to lead to a lot of unpredictability. You can simply just yank the wheel out of your hands. When you do get into a racing car, you've probably seen it, whether it's in the movies or YouTube videos or anything else. A lot of people, once they start driving, you know, the faster they're driving, the more the grip they've got on the wheel. You're losing that sensory feedback from the steering. It's really crucial. If you've got decent power steering, you don't really need the death grip on the wheel. Keep a good grip on it. You obviously don't want it sliding out of your hands, but you need, especially your fingertips and your thumbs, just like any small kind of tactile skill. That's what evolution is built your fingers for, is managing things and getting feedback from things, and you can do, you know, put bolts into cars in the dark and that sort of stuff. A lot better with your fingertips than you can with the palm of your hands. Only has so many nerve endings, but you got a million in your fingertips. So keep a loose grip and keep your fingertips somehow engaged with the steering. Even if you like 10 and 2 and that's your thing, that's fine. But you know, maybe even rest your thumb somewhere you get some feedback and have some sensory feedback from the car as to what it's doing, and just have good hand position. It's not that hard. Just do it. Other than that, that's really all you need to say about that right there. The other thing most people don't realize is your hand-eye coordination that you've built up doing a whole bunch of different activities your whole life works exactly the same when you're driving a car. You've probably seen people, again, you watch people crashing bikes and motorcycles and skiing and everything else. You know, in a car, if you're looking around a corner, you're going to turn the appropriate amount. You're obviously not watching the steering wheel as you're going around a corner, but as you're looking where you want to go, you'll naturally turn there. And if your eyes are always switching to kind of good places, your hand-eye coordination is going to work really well for you. as long as you're looking in the right places. Especially driving at speed, you know, you're driving around in a three-dimensional, 360-degree world here, and stuff's happening all over the place. If, you know, you're one of those people who, once things start to get a little hairy, you're looking at the mailbox and the phone pole and the big hole on the inside of the corner, and there's a dog over there. If you're looking at all those things, you're going to have bad luck. So just try and, again, you can practice it daily driving, looking through corners optimistically, looking over crests where the road's going to go. Just keep moving your eyes to where you want to be. Let everything else just kind of whiz by in your peripheral. You need to be aware of the edges of the road. You need to be aware of what could go wrong if you went off the road, but you don't need to look right at it. So good hand-eye coordination, good hand placement, and some good feedback on the steering. And like I said, the big thing really, when you do get yourself into trouble out there, it's typically because you're trying to do more than one maneuver at a time, right? So the easiest way to get yourself into a skid out into the real world, say you're coming around a turn right here, if you come into a corner like this, when you're actually making it around this part of the turn, you don't want to be aggressively on the brakes or aggressively on the throttle, because you're going to take away those front tires' ability to bite into the terrain. You know, we've got 100% traction. You've seen the traction circle diagrams and everything else probably. If not, you can find them really easily. But basically, the whole goal here is that as you're making it around this turn, you're giving the tires enough grip to bite in and carry you around that corner and fight that centripetal motion or whatever that's going to kick you off there, and you're going to make it around the corner nicely. Full throttle or full brake as you're making it around this corner, it's going to get you in a bad situation. Maybe that's a situation that you want, that you're trying to induce, and you know you want to get into a skid and you're intentionally doing it. That's one thing. But in a normal daily driving kind of mindset, if you're out there driving around in the snow, and you're hard on the brakes and turning the wheel, it's not going to be pretty. You're hard on the throttle and turning the wheel, it's not going to be pretty. How your car's going to respond depends on what kind of vehicle you have. So really quickly, just to define, you know, the two main terms that we're going to be dealing with, understeer and oversteer. Understeer is when you've turned the wheels and the car has failed to respond to that input. The car continues going straight, even though the front wheels are turned. That is understeer. Sure, we can all agree on that. Oversteer is the opposite. Oversteer is when here you are, you've turned the wheels, and the back end starts to slide around, and you end up over here spun out or something like that. This would be oversteer. Both are very manageable situations, and they're going to happen to you a lot when you're driving at speed or driving on slippery roads or both. It's just knowing what you've done to get yourself into that situation and being able to kind of do the opposite to get you out of it. Equal actions, you know, every action equal and opposite, you know, as the man said. So what can get you into an understeer situation? Well, as I said, more than one maneuver at a time. If you're fully on the brakes and trying to turn, the car's not going to turn probably. Your ABS may come on, the tires may lock up, it might turn slightly, but it's not going to turn in the direction that those front tires are pointed. You might get some steering out of it. It might not be complete terminal understeer, but it's not going to turn the way you want if you're fully on the brakes while you're turning the wheel. So that's wheel lockup understeer, or just, you know, more than one maneuver at a time. Fully on the brakes with the steering in is probably not a good idea unless you've got really good ABS. You're probably not going to like what happens there. So if that happens to you, and here you are and you realize, I'm on the brakes hard and I'm turning, if you want it to turn, ease off that brake pedal, look where you want to go, and the car's going to turn. Simple. It can happen the same basically if you're accelerating hard. If you're full throttle and full steering, especially in a front wheel drive car. If those front tires are spinning a little bit when you turn the wheel, say you're just trying to get out of your driveway and it's icy, you're on the gas hard and turning, it's not going to turn. It might accelerate a little, it might even turn a little. You know, it might turn this much, that's, you know, okay, but it's not going to achieve its goal of turning proportionally to the amount of steering that you've added in. So, really simple front wheel drive cars, four wheel drive cars. If you're accelerating aggressively while you're turning, if the car doesn't turn and keeps going straight, ease off the gas and the car's going to regain grip and turn around the corner. It can happen to you in rear-wheel drive cars, surprisingly enough. If you're hard on the throttle, all the weight's on the back of the car. And if you've got traction on the back and the thing bites in and it's going pretty good, when you turn the wheel, it might not turn. Just because there's no weight on the front end, and that's where your steering tires are, you can have a bad time doing that too. So acceleration, over acceleration while you're steering will make understeer. In all different vehicles, even in a rear-wheel drive car, it happens a lot. When you feel that, same thing, every action equal and opposite, you've got a lot of gas on and the wheels turn, ease off the gas, and the car's going to turn for you. So that's understeer. Oversteer, very similar. Whatever you've done to put yourself into this situation, do the opposite to get yourself out of it. So if you're driving along down the road and you do something silly and now the back end is sliding around, and now here you are sliding sideways down the road, what'd you do to get there? You did something. It can happen for a lot of different reasons. Same thing on the brakes. Braking can cause oversteer. Not so much these days the way that cars are engineered, but if you start disabling systems and you start playing around, it's pretty easy to get a lot of different cars to rotate while you're on the brakes, because now you've got all the weight on the front end of the vehicle. Those front tires are going to bite in. All your grip is on the front end, and that back end is light and it's going to come around. So if braking caused this to happen, same thing with the steering. Look where you want to go and you'll steer in that direction. Look down the road. You'll countersteer or get the front wheels pointed in the direction of travel. If anyone ever says countersteer, that's what they're talking about. Look where you want to go and steer down the road and release the brakes. And the car is going to drive out of it. It's not magic, it's just simple physics, and that's what you're going to be up against. Can you get the same oversteer effect with the throttle? Absolutely, especially in a rear-wheel drive car, in some all-wheel drive cars. Being hard on the accelerator while you're turning, yeah, it takes the weight off the front, but if those back tires are spinning, they've got no grip and the back end's going to move around. Same situation. Look where you want to go, countersteer in that direction, ease off of that gas if that's what caused your problem, and the car, again, it's going to straighten out magically. So figure out what you've done to get yourself there. It's usually not too bad to fix. What we do see, kind of the third type of skid that most of the time we try and avoid, sometimes we'll do it intentionally, is a counter skid. And you've probably seen this, again, you watch the Mustangs leaving the parking lots and everything else and all the funny videos of people crashing on the internet. It's because it's not natural to recover from an oversteer skid. Most people do it too late and most people do it too much. And what will happen is, if you've turned and all of a sudden the car is sliding sideways, the back end steps out of line, it's natural to say, ooh, this ain't good, and do one of these numbers. And what happens then is, if you overcorrect for this, boink, the car's going to flip back around the other direction, and then I'm sure you've all done this once or twice, where you go pinballing down the road, kind of in this fashion, when you should be going straight down the road and the back end sliding back and forth and it's really hard to control. Typically, you didn't look in the right place. When it first happened to you, right there is your option to say, okay, if you're going down a straight road, hey, I need to go way up there. That's my target. You would have countersteered more precisely in that direction. And you would have fixed it. So the one thing is, okay, if you're looking over here and looking at the ditch and you're looking at somebody's house over here or whatever it is, you're going to get into a lot of those counter skids just because you're looking everywhere but where you want to go. So look where you need to go and steer there, you'll be fine. And two is the palming of the wheel and the overcorrections with the steering is a big contributor to this. And the other thing is just gross, really abrupt, jerky movements with the pedals. If you jump all over the gas and then go all the way off and slam on the brakes and go all the way off and jump on the gas, these big abrupt inputs are going to get you flopping back and forth until you finally crash in that guy's house or something like that. So counter skids, typically to be avoided. We can talk pendulum turns where you intentionally use this effect. If you're sliding one way, when it comes back, it usually slides more abruptly. Well, for a tight corner, you can use that. You can get a little pendulum turn coming into corners, and that's really good and effective in the right situation. But when it happens accidentally, it can be pretty ugly. So when you're really dealing with this stuff, if you're not really locking tires up and spinning tires, the big effect right here that we get at any time you're going around a corner, whether you're skidding or not, the weight transfer is going to be really crucial. We talked about weight transfer to the rear when you're on the throttle. We talked about weight transfer to the front when you're on the brakes. Well, now when you're steering, if I turn right, weight goes onto the left. If I turn left, weight goes onto the right. You can feel that, you know, your old Buick station wagon with the vinyl bench seat. You turn left and you go sliding all the way across the thing. So get used to that. The problem is you need to think of your car kind of as a, you know, a 1 or 2 ton metal box that's sitting there on 4 springs, because that's basically what you've got going on. And we all know how springs work. You take a spring out of a pen and compress it and let it go, and it goes flying all the way across the room. So if you're moving weight around from the front to the side, to the back, to the side, to the other side, smoothly and deliberately, with conscious effort to be smooth about it, you'll probably be fine. It's when you're letting the weight bounce and pogo stick you around that you're gonna have big problems. And it's not something that's very easily fixed other than just smoothing out your inputs and trying to be nice about things. We often talk about it as the little, you know, the horse that was in the playground that was like on a big long spring and you're sitting there on the horse and it's moving around and wobbling. Well, the more aggressive you are, you fall right off the horse. But if you can keep it pretty smooth, you can stay on the little horse on the spring thing, or whatever makes sense to you if you've got some other analogy or kind of childhood memory or something like that. But really, as you're going around any turn, as you're coming into this, the weight is on the front tires for the most part. You're braking coming into a corner. That's all well and good. As you approach this corner, you need to release the brakes smoothly as you turn the wheel, because you've got the 2 front springs compressed. Now you want to get the 2 side springs compressed and minimize the floppy bounciness right there, because that's what's going to lead to troubles in the middle of the corner. So smoothly, weights on the front while you're braking, you're easing off the brakes and turning. As you're making it around this corner here, all of the weight is on these 2 left side tires. Not all of it, unless you're driving on 2 wheels, but the vast majority of the weight is on those 2 outside tires, and keep it there as long as you want. You know, just let it ride until you're pretty much done with this corner, and then the goal is to smoothly go from the weight on the side to easing off the steering by straightening it out and easing onto the accelerator to get the weight smoothly onto the rear tires on the way out of the corner. So it's managing that weight transfer from both front tires to both side tires to both rear tires. And then obviously, you know, as it comes around, you get the next corner, you're going from the front back to the front, to the side, to the side. And if you control your inputs with pretty smooth pedal motions and pretty smooth steering motions, you'll be fine. One thing to keep in mind, we had a past student from here, Kyle M, you might know him, a great guy. He always joked, you know, you've probably heard the old kind of saying, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And his twist on that was, smooth is fast, but slow is just slow. Sometimes it's the same thing in a vehicle right here. You may need quick steering inputs. You might need to throw some steering in to get around an obstacle. You know, if you're going from one chicane to the next, especially if you're sliding a car. You know, if you're sliding around here sideways and now you're worried about coming into this one and the back end starts sliding around again, and you need to get some counter steering. If you're doing something crazy through some of these corners, whether you're drifting or rallying or just on the street or tarmac racing or driving quickly, whatever, you often need some quick steering. One way, the other way, maybe a little more than that, whatever you might need to do. Turn quickly. Just don't turn very, very suddenly. You can imagine driving straight down an ice skating rink and you just turn the wheel all the way. That's going to make massive understeer right there. All of a sudden the front tires are going to, and then you've got no grip on the road anymore. So it's a matter of turning smoothly. You can use a lot, you can do it quickly, and it's riding that fine line. But if you're too abrupt or too sudden, you can just break traction on the front end, and then all of a sudden it's gone. We see it is very similar when you come into a corner like this. Most people find, because of that weight transfer, just turning the wheel puts weight under the front a little bit. Right? Turning the wheel adds resistance. You get a little more friction up there, and you'll feel when you turn the wheel the nose dives, but it comes right back up. And that's just because of the springs. It goes from a little weight on the front to kind of a more neutral state. That's why a lot of times staying off the gas, and we'll brake a little bit often in corners, because when you turn, the weight goes on the front. When it comes back off, You don't want that. You want to keep the weight on the front. So when you turn, you're off the throttle, maybe braking gently to keep that weight down on the nose to help the car around the corner. And it's very similar to a lot of the different things that we're teaching, and a lot of the different things that you're going to be using out there in the world is to say, okay, a decent driver knows about understeer and oversteer and counter skids and drives consciously and aware enough to avoid getting themselves into these skids. When you start getting a little better and you start picking the speed up, you'll be able to recognize them as they happen to you and correct for them on the fly, and that's very, very good. The next step is to say the fastest way around almost any given corner is to have a bit of a slide. And this is where we get in an argument with some of the tarmac racing guys and some people on pavement, but anyone who's watched touring car racing, Formula One, any of this stuff where people are really pushing hard, people are really driving at the limit, they're not worried so much about their tire wear and managing and the rules and everything else, where people are really driving flat out, just going hell-bent for skick times, they're sliding. And it's not a lot. It's not as dramatic as it might be on snow or ice or gravel, but you're definitely seeing, some skidding happening on pavement. And what is the advantage? Why are we intentionally sliding cars around? Why is this school even in business teaching people how to slide cars around corner? It's because it's faster. On all surfaces, to a very small degree on pavement, a little bit of sliding here and there, it will make you quicker. On gravel, if you're going fast, you're going to be sliding a lot. That's just the nature of the deal. You're going to be understeering intentionally, you're going to be oversteering intentionally, you're going to be getting into counter skids intentionally. If you're racing on snow and ice, it's even more so. You're skidding and sliding the whole time. You're never really driving truly down the road or keeping 100% traction in a corner, because if you did, you'd just be getting lapped by all the fast guys and it'd be ridiculous. So coming into a turn like this, if you came around here and you said that's a 30-mile-an-hour turn and you brake to about 30 miles an hour and you made it around here nice and smoothly without skidding at all, and you didn't hear any tire squeal and everything was just really perfectly stuck to the road, that's a 30-mile-an-hour turn. If you came around here with just a slight bit of controlled oversteer, two things are going to happen. One, you can accomplish more of this turn in the first part of the turn, right? So instead of having a car pointed, on the line, well, now you're hanging it out a little bit. You're going to be pointed toward the exit sooner, right? So you're going to be this guy right here, and basically by this point, you've got the wheel straight. Sure, the car might be sliding slightly toward the exit, that's fine. But you'll line up for your exit prematurely, which is a good thing because you can accelerate out sooner. So that's one advantage. You line up for the exit of the turn sooner. Two is, especially on gravel and snow and all this other stuff, skidding and sliding a little bit, it improves your traction on that road surface. If these tires are just skipping and grabbing and kind of hugging and right on the edge of adhesion and slightly sliding, they're gripping better than if you took it cautiously and the tire was just kind of stuck to the road versus really under stress and strain and grabbing along and trying to make it around there. On gravel, on snow, on any of that stuff, a more dramatic slide, maybe, sure. And certainly that's where you get into doing some of the fancier stuff, where if this was pavement, you'd only get a slight oversteer here and brake again and track around, maybe with just a little bit of slip here and there to line yourself up for exit sooner and to get on the throttle sooner coming out of corners. Where, if this was a gravel turn or a snowy rally or something like that, you're going to be braking hard and chucking it in here intentionally. And this is where I was using the idea of the counter skid before, because if you slide around here, you can turn back and get a more exaggerated slide around there and go blasting around that corner much, much faster than if you, stuck to the road perfectly the whole time. There's definitely a line between what feels fast and looks cool and the spectators are in love with as far as doing that kind of stuff. Like that line I just took where I'm broadside to the road and hanging onto it and chucking it back and using all my skills and having a great time and everybody's happy and the crowd's cheering. Isn't that fast? Sure, it's fast, but really it's about managing a slight bit of angle here, get on a little more brake, get it turned in, slight bit of angle, whoop, I spun out, sorry, slight bit of angle around there, and back on the throttle and you're gone. Certainly being neat and tidy, it has its advantages, but there's still a fair bit of sliding going on. There's still tires spinning, tires locking up, tires sliding, and all of that stuff going on. So certainly an advantage sometimes to induce and intentionally get into an oversteer, or intentionally use that counter skid effect, or intentionally even understeer sometimes. You know, in a front wheel drive car, if the front tires are spinning while you've got the wheels turned, it's understeering a little. But if you've got plenty of room to let that happen and you only need it to turn slightly and it's all right, let the thing understeer. It's going to be faster. Just slight bits of understeer, allow that to happen sometimes and you're fine. Same thing with corner entry. You know, if you're coming in here really hot, on the brakes hard, you turn, it's going to understeer a little bit. No problem until you ease off the brakes. Then it's going to turn. It might oversteer a little bit. That's fine. Back on the throttle, come into here, brake. It might understeer a little. Get it turned. It might oversteer a little. Back on the throttle, it might understeer a little. And you're just managing that and then calculating based on the surface around how much of that you want to let happen. And say, okay, you know, I'm driving at the limit, there's some sliding, there's some skidding, it's not too much, I'm well in control still, and you're good. Unless you're drifting, or, you know, you're in a rally and there's a whole lot of spectators on the inside of this corner, something like that, then you really go for it and do whatever you want. But you're always bargaining how much of this slipping and sliding and fun stuff is actually helping you. Sometimes it's just a little bit here and there, and sometimes you need a lot of it just to get through and get up a hill, or whatever it might be. So in the real world, daily driving situations, you know, it's good to know understeer, oversteer, counter skids, hand placement, eye position, getting through everything, smooth inputs, smooth weight transfer. Focus on all of those things every day. Always looking where you want to go. Your hands are there, your feet are smooth, your speed's right, one maneuver at a time. You know, when you do start racing, do the same thing, only a little bit quicker. You know, be able to cure those skids when they happen. You'll have understeer, you'll have some oversteer. Get used to correcting for those. And then the next level with any kind of racing is learn when and where some of these skids can help you. And when and where you intentionally induce some of this stuff, get it to happen, ride it out, and use that to get your lap times up there, to get heat into the tires, to get a lot of different stuff going on. But that's the name of the game as far as, you know, how and when you're using the steering. So be safe out there, keep it on a closed course and all of that happy stuff. Don't do too much wacky crap out on the roads of America or wherever you are, and have a good time with it. We'll see you next time.